Hello, my name is Klāvs, Māris, Miezis, and this is my presentation for the Harvard Bible College Undergraduate course in Biblical Hermeneutics on Intertextual Approach. There are many ways to interpret a text. Some of them are new and recently developed ideas. Others are much older. All these ideas can be used to discover what the text meant when it was written, and what does it mean now. One of such ideas is the intertextual approach. In this presentation, we will look at the history of this approach, at some of its main exponents. We will look at an example of how it works, as well as evaluate its strengths and weaknesses. What is this intertextual approach then? For a long time it was believed and used in traditional literary theory that when a person reads a text, the text itself possesses a meaning, and the readers exact this meaning from it. This process is called interpretation. However, today this theory has changed. Literary scientists now believe that works of literature are built from systems, codes, and even traditions from other art forms like movies or culture as a whole. They believe now that the act of reading, rather than the interpretation, is the moment when a reader is engaged in discovering the textual relations. The text now does not exist by itself, but it is related to all kinds of other texts that the author has in mind, or even the reader. This makes the text much more complicated than before, and adds much more meaning to it. This term, intertextuality, was coined by a Bulgarian-French philosopher, Julia Kristeva, and intertextuality and intertext are coinages in English, formed from this word coined by Julia Kristeva, intertextualité in French. The Latin word is intertexo, which means to interweave or intertwine. And the idea of this is that the text is never a single entity. It has all kinds of influences, both from the author's and the reader's perspective. It intertwines with other texts that the author and the reader has met in his or her way. As Kilbride puts it, at its most basic level, intertextuality acknowledges the fact that no text is an island. All texts are intertexts insofar as they refer to, recycle, and draw from other pre-existing texts. This idea was introduced in biblical studies in 1989 when two books were published. The first was a collection of essays called Intertextuality in Biblical Writings by Worcester, and the other was called Echoes of Scripture in the Letters of Paul by Richard Hayes. Different scholars have used this method since then, and it has proven to be a creative and useful way of looking at the scripture if one is careful with the dangerous parts of it, as with any other method or thing. We will look at these things later, these dangerous things. This method has been used in biblical studies by such scholars as Worcester, Hayes, Casemont, Berkeley, Robbins, and others. Let us look at an example then on how does intertextuality work with the Bible. Māris discerns 5 types of intertextuality: intertextual echo, narrative intertextuality, exegetical intertextuality, dialogical intertextuality, and postmodern intertextuality. Here we will look at an example of intertextual echo that Hayes describes in his book Echoes of Scripture in the Letters of Paul. He looks at Philippians 1:19, which says, "For I know that through your prayers and the help of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, this will turn out for my deliverance." And he notes that the last part of this verse is in exact agreement with the Septuagint of Job 13:16, which says, "This will be my salvation, that the godless shall not come before him." And in Greek it has the same wording, "Tuto moi habopesetai eisoterian." He comments that the echo is not marked, and that Paul's words are understandable without going back to Job. But Job adds something to the reading of this text, because it adds a parallel where a reader can draw more insight. As Hayes himself asserts, By echoing Job's words, Paul the prisoner tacitly assumes the role of righteous sufferer as paradigmatically figured by Job. Thereby he implicitly transfers to himself some of the significations that traditionally cluster about the figure of Job. What are the strengths and the weaknesses of this approach then? As we can well see, this approach gives us quite a lot of good and deep insight, because in truth the texts are not like lonely islands but are influenced from all sides. As I said before, it has proven to be a creative way to look at the Bible. As Māris puts it, intertextual studies suggest that under the right conditions, allusions and echoes might be just as important as explicit quotations for an understanding of a text. However, there are some distinct drawbacks in the intertextuality that we need to be careful with. As Māris demonstrates, many scholars understand this term differently from each other, and it needs to be cleared when it is used. Māris himself hopes that the 5 types that I have mentioned also that he has suggested will help to clear this confusion. Another worry for scholars is that the intertextual method will take things more speculative when talking about Bible, because allusions and echoes are more elusive than quotations. It might lead people into all kinds of speculations about the scripture, about the relationships between the Old and the New Testaments, and even between the biblical writers and some thoughts and writers at the same time that were circling around in that time. Māris answers to that with a suggestion that it cannot be avoided, these speculations. They will always take place with or without an intertextualization. Well, thank you for listening to my presentation of Intertextual Approach on Biblical Hermeneutics. God bless you and have a nice day.